Good morning, class. Mr. Walks here. Another wonderful day in digital learning. So let's go over some of the old business first before we start on our lesson for today. So just as a reminder, on the 30th, if you're an A day, and the 31st, if you're on a B day, we will have our second unit test, and that will conclude the third quarter. So we will have one lecture today, which we'll get to in a moment. And so today's lecture will cover the 24th for A day and the 25th for B day. And then the next 2 days, which would be Thursday and Sunday, will be review days. So on those 2 days, what I will do is I will have not only the chat room that I always keep open, but I will do a live chat as well. So what I'll do is I will open up my camera during the regular class period. So ideally, you should come into the chat room on the hour that you would normally have me. Now, I know that some people have issues with access to technology. So if for whatever reason you can't access the internet during your class period, you're welcome to come to one of the other class periods. Or I know some people aren't able to have access to the internet till later in the evening. So for those people, if you have an issue, just drop me a message and I'll make myself available whenever, even if it's in the evening for this coming week, getting ready for the test. Just let me know and we'll set up an appointment to meet whenever, if you have questions or if you just want me to go over the review. Just let me know again and we'll set up an appointment whenever it's convenient for you. So just let me know. And it'd be nice if we have a couple people like that, if we can try to schedule them at the same time. So that, and just to refresh, that test will again be a Google document, and I will open it up on the 30th, which is an A day. And even if you're on a B day, you're welcome to take it on the A day. You're not required to. I don't want, even though I'm, even though I'm releasing everything on A days, if you're on a B day, you're more than welcome to work on it. Wait to work on it until your B day. Like I said in the last video, the way I give assignments during all of this is I'll give you 3 days to finish it, so that whether you're an A or a B day, you'll always have 48 hours to complete assignments. Plus, you know by now that I'm very open on taking late work, so don't stress about doing everything on the A day. If you're a B day class and you have a lot of stuff on the A day, just wait for it. Don't just because I opened it up doesn't mean you have to do it immediately then. So I will have a review sheet, and that'll be what we cover Thursday and Sunday. I'll be going over what is the stuff that we're going to have on this test, what you need to study, anything like that. Basically what it's going to be is everything we've done during the digital learning. So for now, if you want to review, just go back over all of the assignments from Schoology that are on where it says virtual school. So let's go ahead and get started on today's lecture. So what you'll need to do is, before I start the lecture, what you should have open is the PowerPoint. if you're finding this video, you went to Schoology, found a video. There's also a PowerPoint called Natural Selection. You should have that open. That's what I'm going to do, is I'm going to go through that PowerPoint very quickly, hitting the high points. And then, since everybody wants to know what is the homework, you will have been shared a Google form. Basically, that's an abbreviated version of the exploratory labs that we've been doing all year. So all the questions are on the Google form, and any links that you need are on the Google form. I added some more bells and whistles to the Google form. So some of the questions there may not be an answer to. So there's a box. All you have to do, if you read the stuff, like there's one that's read it. So I have the text that you need to read. In that box, there's not a question. But there's a little box. It said just check it that you've read it, and then because it won't let you move on to the next question until you've acknowledged that you've at least read it. And then there's some others. There's multiple choice. There's short answer. There's some others with the drop-down box. So you have to read the scenario and you have to decide, is this artificial breeding or is this natural selection? So you just pick one or the other. Okay, so let's go on to the PowerPoint. So you should have the PowerPoint open. It says natural selection. It has the giraffe. The bird there is the finch, and the old man there, that's Charles Darwin, and some corn. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So the arc, again, the storyline, how do we connect all of this stuff together? So we talked about the body forms, how scientists realize that they look similar. We talked about the embryos, the fossils, how everything goes together. And then we talked about the Punnett squares, and we talked about how even though you had two brown-eyed parents, it is still possible to get a blue-eyed child. So what we're going to be talking about today, again, is natural selection. So you might get these, you can call them mutations, where you have these brown-eyed parents that have a blue-eyed child. And so that's the genes. Now we're going to talk about the process. What does that mean? Does that mutation help the person or the individual, or does it harm them? And we'll talk about that throughout today. So let's go on to the next slide, which is, so this is your essential question. This is what you should be able to answer when you finish with today's lecture. So it reads, how can you identify changes in genetic traits over several generations? And then the next one says, what are the differences between natural selection and selective breeding? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about changes over multiple generations, and then natural selection and artificial breeding. Okay, so genetic traits. So those are the things that we were talking about when we did the Punnett squares. These are things that you inherit from your parents. Your hair color, there's many things, your eye color, your hair color. Are you tall? Are you short? Do your earlobes, are they attached or separated? Can you roll your tongue? All those different things that we talked about in Punnett squares. So as you can see the picture from the puppies, that this is all different puppies from one litter, and so they have the same parents, but they have all these different features. And so we haven't talked too much about genes, but when we did the Punnett squares, remember I said that there's two letters. It could be both capital, both short, both lowercase, one capital, one short. those are representing the genes, and you'll get that next year in 7th grade, a little bit more in depth. We haven't really talked about that a whole lot. You'll need to talk more about sexual reproduction, mitosis, meiosis, how all these genes get mixed up. But that's for next year. But all you need to know is that the genes are, and it's GENES. We're not talking about the jeans you wear. But these genes are inside every single one of your cells, and it has all the information how to make you. Okay, the next slide is if you're doing a notebook. So just a reminder for the test, it's open book, open notes. So whatever information you feel that you need, you should be putting on a piece of paper, and you'll have access to that for the test. So you can see if you're going to come up with a notebook, some things you might want that could be testable is Charles Darwin. What is natural selection? What is selective breeding? What is an adaptation? All 4 of those are valid questions for the test. So, I can guarantee you that there's going to be a question about this man on the test. So, and I'm not going to ask you things about the years that he lived, but you should know the name Charles Darwin. So just I can guarantee you that there's going to be a question about the man Charles Darwin. He's the one that came up with this theory of evolution, natural selection. So make sure you can recognize the name Charles Darwin and connect it with natural selection and evolution. And there's a quote there, and I had mentioned it in the last video, that it says, "It is not the strongest of the species that survived, nor the most intelligent, but the one most responsive to change." So the classic example is 65 million years ago, the dinosaurs were the strongest animals on the planet. They're not here anymore, right? Why? Because things changed. When the asteroid struck the Earth, the climate changed, lots of things changed. They weren't as adaptable as, say, the mammals or other creatures. So the dinosaurs went extinct, and other animals came to prominence who were more adaptable. So, just some background on Charles Darwin. You can see the years that he lived. There's a video that you'll watch in the homework that talks about him a little bit more. He went on a boating trip, couple year long boating trip, 5 years, and he made these observations because he was a good scientist and made some observations. So again, make sure you recognize the name Charles Darwin. So an adaptation is a body part, a feature, or a behavior that helps a living thing survive and function better in its environment. We are the sum collection of millions of years of adaptations. So the last assignment we did, we talked about opposable thumbs. That was an adaptation. Not all animals have opposable thumbs. When we developed an opposable thumb, that's something that helped us to become the dominant species that we are. All primates, or monkeys, apes, and humans have an opposable thumb. A classic example is the panda bear. It doesn't have an opposable thumb, but it has a little nub, and it uses, its paws has a little nub, and that's what it uses to chew on the bamboo. Maybe in 1,000,000 years from now, that little nub may turn into a thumb. Who knows? But again, we are the sum total of all the adaptations throughout history, throughout millions and millions of years. And these adaptations occur because of natural selection. And we'll talk about what natural selection is in a moment. So this one may seem pretty obvious, but so we'll just talk about organisms is a single animal, a single plant, a single cell, and where it lives is its environment. When you get into biology, you'll talk about this a little bit more. There's different types of communities from an organism up to different biomes. So you'll talk about that more in biology. So, natural selection. What is natural selection? It is a process whereby organisms better adapted to their environment tend to survive and produce more outcome. So in this example, a giraffe with the longer neck would be able to eat more food, so it would tend to survive. So if a giraffe had offspring and it also had the longer neck, that offspring would tend to survive. We're not going to get into it much in this class, but you can see the note that says this is Lamarck's giraffe. There's some problems with this view, but I don't want to get bogged down into it because, well, no, I'm not even going to go into it, but basically the idea is the ones that are better able to survive will end up having kids or offspring and survive. But don't worry about the name Lamarck. That's the name of a scientist, but don't get bogged down in that. Just focus on Darwin. So these finches, you should know something about finches. These are birds. Finches are birds that Darwin found on the island of the Galapagos, and there was different types of finches. And he, being a good scientist, noticed that all these different birds, they seem to come from or one type of bird, but they all have different kinds of beaks. And he noticed that the beaks corresponded to the type of environment they lived in. And again, one of the presentations in your homework will talk about this more. But if you notice, so if you go to the next slide, it talks about different kinds of bird beaks. So you notice the first one is more cone shaped, and that's made for cracking seeds. There may be a beak that's long and slender. There may be like the woodpecker. It's long and hard, so it could tap into a tree trunk. Then if you're a bird of prey, you might want the little hook that you can bite down into flesh. And then there's the duckbill. So different types of bird beaks. So, and I'll just go into a little bit. So what Darwin noticed was that all of these finches descend from one type of finch. And what happened was in the Galapagos, there are a bunch of islands that are off the coast of Ecuador in northern South America. And what he noticed is some islands, there may be grass, it may mostly be grass. So the birds there had smaller beaks that they can just pick at the insects. There may be another island that had lots of trees, so there were seeds. The birds on that island would have short but very powerful beaks that they can crack the seeds and get stuff inside. There may be another island that had more flowers, so the beaks on the finches there were long and slender, so they can the beaks can get the nectar. So again, he noticed that all of these birds, if you were to do a family tree, they descend from one original finch that made it to all these islands. but then over time things change. So if you think back to that Punnett Square example, so maybe blue eyes only occurs 25% of the time. Maybe the other 75% it's brown eyes. So you may have, if you say you had 4 kids or 4 offspring, so 3 of them may be brown eyed, 1 of them may be blue eyed. So the same example here with the bird beaks. So maybe naturally you might normally have the short little really strong beak, but maybe through some kind of mutation or something, one of your offspring might have the long slender beak. So if 3/4 of them were the short beak and 1/4 was the long beak, you go to an island, but so the majority are the short beak. But say you go to an island that has the flowers. If you have that short beak, you're not going to be able to get the nectar. So you're not going to be able to eat. You're not going to survive. So what's going to happen? Even though the long beak was in the minority, only being 25%, if that one is the one that's able to get the nectar and survive, he or she is going to be able to eat and then find a mate and reproduce. So on that island, even though the mutation for the long beak was a minority, they survived and passed on that mutation. So a different thing may happen on a different island where some other adaptation is more advantageous. So that's basically, in a nutshell, that is what evolution and natural selection is the selection for the thing that helps you adapt the best. So the next slide just gives you some more examples of natural selection. Don't worry about the draw something slide. So I've been using the word natural selection. So that's basically nature selecting. So like I said, the bird that has the beak that can get the nectar is selected by nature. Now, nature doesn't have a conscious mind. It's not saying, I like this bird better than that bird. It's just a matter of which one is better able to survive. So that's natural selection. Now, humans can also play a part too, right? So all of the different dog species that are out there all descend from the wolf. You know, now with dogs, you have things as big as St. Bernards down to little Chihuahuas. They look very, very different, but they all are basically different types of dog. So humans can pick. Maybe they want a small dog. So the original wolf is much bigger, but generation after generation, they selected dogs that were smaller, and that's how Chihuahuas came about. So selective breeding or artificial selection is where humans are involving themselves in the process. All right, going on to the next slide. Again, it's talking about selective breeding. So if you think about that, if you like corn, you think about that corn stalk that that's in the field. Corn didn't originally look like that, right? If you look in the slide, the middle picture, it says corn. That's what's called seosinte. The original corn only had a couple kernels on it. And what happened after thousands and thousands and thousands of years? So every year, the farmer would look at the corn. They would pick the ones that produced the most kernels, and he would plant those types of seeds again. So the next year, a few more kernels would appear, and over thousands of years, now we have the big corn stalks that we're used to. So that is humans interfering with, or selecting which breeds they like better. Same thing like apples. The apple, that's not the normal size of a fruit for a tree. But over thousands and thousands of years, we have selected the bigger fruit, planted those seeds, and the next year, bigger fruit occurs. Again, the video will discuss, in the homework, we'll discuss that some more. Okay. So, a controversial topic is GMOs. You may or may not know about these. You'll have to pick for yourselves what you view about genetically modified foods. So it depends on how you identify GMOs. I mean, like I said, corn is genetically modified, right? It started with just a couple kernels, and now it's this big thing. But the distinction is in GMOs, and you may know about, they're wanting to change not just naturally by picking the bigger kernels, but they want scientists are wanting to go in and change the genes. So that's what has a lot of people concerned, is that a good or a bad thing? And you'll have a reading in your homework about GMOs and what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages. And if you want to talk about that more when we have our live meet, we can discuss some of that. But so you can see some examples there. Corn, what they want to do is take the DNA of corn, inject it with some other genes that make the corn resistant to insects, which means they can make more corn. But are there other side effects? That's something to think about. Okay, and so that is my presentation for this. I know it's a very whirlwind tour of natural selection, but what you should know, again, you should know the name of Charles Darwin. You should know the difference between natural selection and artificial selection. Again, when you do the reading or watch the videos in the homework, it'll help you more. But so now you have all the presentations for the test that's coming up next week. Okay, so again, drop me a message in the chat, or we can live chat at the end of the week. Okay, talk to you later. Bye-bye.